Imagine you're a new bride living in Delhi, India. Your family has just paid money they don't really have to your husband and his family in order to secure the marriage. They've bought them new kitchen appliances and even a new TV. Now, your husband and his family decide this isn't quite enough, and they ask your family for $5,000 in order to secure your safety. Now, this is money your family doesn't have, and you have two younger sisters that are also going to need dowries in order to get married. So one day, your husband and your father in law and your mother in law decide they're sick of waiting. So they cover you in kerosene and light you on fire. Now, this may sound like an extreme situation, but this is the reality for thousands of women in India. This practice is called bridal burning or dowry death. Now, bridal burning has become a more commonplace thing in India and has major repercussions for women, their families, and Indian society. So today I'm going to give you a little background information on bridal burning, the origins of this practice, its effect on women in India, and what steps are being taken to help prevent it. So in order to really understand bridal burning, you need to understand the concept that it centers around, which is a dowry. So I'm going to give you a little bit of information on what a dowry is and what bridal burning really is. A dowry is a tangible or intangible thing that the bride's family gives to the groom's family in order to secure the marriage contract. Now, in some situations, the groom or his family decide that they want more than just that initial dowry that they asked for. And sometimes when they don't get that money or those objects, this can lead to something called dowry death, which is basically violence and death that occurs to a bride when her family is unable to pay what the groom's family is asking for. Now, the most common form of dowry death is bridal burning, which is where a bride is covered in kerosene or paraffin and is lit on fire. According to an article I read in the online newspaper The Telegraph, 8,391 women died in 2010 alone from bridal burnings in India. This equals out to one woman every 90 minutes. The problem is this is probably not even an accurate picture because many of these things go unreported or are seen as accidents or suicides. In an academic paper I read by a woman by the name of Abnita Lakhani, she talks about a specific woman's case, a woman named Sunita Viri. Now, Sunita was a brand new bride, much like the person in my introduction, and when her family could no longer pay what her husband's family was asking for, her husband and her father-in-law tied her to a cot and lit her on fire. She later died from her injuries. So now that you know a little bit of information about what bridal burning is, I'm going to talk about the beginnings of this practice. Where did it come from? Now, in that same article by Abnita Lakhani, she talks about how bridal burnings actually started 2,500 years ago. So this practice has literally been around for thousands of years. Added to that, India has very designated roles for women. Women are seen as an economic burden, first to their families and then to the families that they marry into. They are unable to contribute to the household in the way that men can. India also has a caste system, putting people in different socioeconomic levels. Now, in this age of consumerism, more and more husbands and husbands' families are asking for increased dowries in order to help them rise in their socioeconomic status. They want to move up, and the easiest way to do that is to get money and things from these families. Unfortunately, when these families can't pay because they really don't have the money or the resources, this can lead to death. And in those instances, those husbands are actually free to marry again and get another dowry. So since I've covered a little bit of information about where bridal burning came from, I'm going to really get into how does this affect India as a society and women. Now, in an article that I read from BBC News, they talked about how in India, the latest numbers say there are 933 women for every 1,000 men. There's getting to be a bigger and bigger gap between the sexes because of these bridal burning cases. And in some situations, these women are even committing suicide because they feel that they are nothing but a burden on their families, and they are under continual pressure and scrutiny for being a burden. They know that their families can't afford to pay the money that their husbands are asking, and they know that they are disappointing their husbands and their families. Now, another story that I had heard about in Avnita Lakhani's article was about a woman called Nitra Sharma. Now, Nitra was a different kind of woman. She found out that her future husband was trying to extort $25,000 from her family in order to secure the marriage. And she decided she wasn't going to have any of this. So she actually enforced a law that's been on the books for years and years in order to get her future husband and his family jailed. So now that I've kind of told you a little bit about the effects that it's had on people, I'm going to get into what is being done about it. And part of that is the law that Nitra Sharma used to get her future husband and his family put in jail. Now, this law is known as the Dowry Prohibition Act, and it came to be in 1961. Now, this basically outlawed dowries. However, as you can clearly see from my speech, dowries are still happening all over India. There are many loopholes in this law and many gray areas that people can skirt around. So it's not really being enforced in the way that it could be. And the Indian government did see this and added amendments in both 1984 and 1986, which basically said if a woman comes to bodily harm or is burned or dies within 7 years of the marriage, this is seen as a criminal offense, which means they proceed with it as it being a criminal case. Now, in some situations, this does mean that families have been, or husbands have been jailed because of this. However, there's a very, very low conviction rate. According to the BBC News article, it's around 30%, which is actually, a fairly low number for the evidence that they usually have in these cases. However, like I said before, because this is a patriarchal society, many women are scared to come forward when they're even threatened with this because they don't want to deal with the possible ramifications of this. Now, even these amendments have loopholes. I mean, a husband could wait 7 years before he decides to injure his wife. And there's also a very vague definition of what constitutes harm to a wife. So really, other laws and other amendments would need to be put in place or would need to be enforced in order for this practice to really stop. Now, Nitra Sharma, who I just discussed earlier in the speech, has created a sort of grassroots campaign because of what she did. More and more women are using the 1961 Dowry Prohibition Act to put their husbands and their husbands' families in jail. There's also a grassroots human rights campaign that's really trying to educate people about what bridal burning really is and help to get the word out and maybe put a stop to this practice. So now I've told you a little bit of basic information about what bridal burning really is. So let's recap. India has had bridal burning around for thousands of years, but it's becoming a more and more commonplace issue. So I told you a little bit about the background of bridal burning, the origins of this practice, and how it really affects women and India as a whole. You also learned about what steps are being taken to hopefully try to prevent it. Now, bridal burning is something that seems extremely foreign to us, and it is a very unfortunate part of a culture that is otherwise very rich and very beautiful. So I hope today that by giving you this information, it will really encourage you to go out and research a little bit more about this issue and maybe become a part of that grassroots campaign to help end this horrible practice.